Record. I'll start in a second. This is the important stuff. So the agenda for today, we've got welcome and intro for now. Then we've got what we call our keynote. And I think, to be honest, when we have 50 people here registered, we can start calling it an official keynote as opposed to when we used 20 keynote. From Dr. Chris Russell, I can see us joined. Thanks for being here, Chris, who's the head of delivery for data R&D at NHS England. Then we'll have our community updates, which is just 15 minutes for a chance for people from the community to share, updates like recent developments in their work, opportunities, all that kind of stuff in quick fire fashion for everyone. Go into a break, and then we'll have our 2 sets of breakout sessions. So they're each 45 minutes. There's 5 sessions per breakout session that you can choose from. Notes will be taken and everything. So if there's more than one you want to go to, don't worry. We'll capture notes and we'll share a write-up and summary afterwards. And we'll come back for a wrap-up at 12:45. Sweet. So on the welcome introduction, a bit of housekeeping to begin with. Our code of conduct is here, and if David, you could just share these links in the chat. So just when you're going through the meeting today, please make sure you're abiding by the code of conduct, listening to people, making sure you're using the neutral, inclusive language, all that kind of stuff. We also have a HackMD for the day on here. Can you see the HackMD now? Are you still seeing the slides?
No, HackMD's there.
HackMD's here, cool. So if you look at the HackMD when you open it, the way HackMD works, those who are unfamiliar with it, you've got 2 sides. If you can't see 2 sides, you can click this button up here, and it's the both screen. And on the black side is like where you can type and text appears, and then the white side is a nice legible way to read it. And if on the agenda you click on the welcome and intros link, there's just a open page that says welcome and introduction, and you can share your name, pronouns, role, organization, and whether you've been here before if you want to. No worries if you don't want to, but also please do if you want to. How do I go back to... Oh, this always happens when I start doing a slideshow. I go into present mode and I never know how to get back into it. I am just gonna share my screen and not go back into the slideshow because I always forget how to do it. Cool. Can you see the slides in front of me?
Yeah.
Sweet. So co-chairs are here to help. Let's do a quick intro. So I'm Hurry. We've got David, Simon, and Balint here. Maybe in that order. Can you guys just say hi? David first.
Hi, everyone. I'm David, project manager at the Turin, also co-chair at the Community Management Working Group. And throughout the day, I'll be here if you need help with anything, find any link again, direct you to any breakout rooms, or you're having any issues at all, please let me know.
Hi, I'm Simon Lee. I'm an infrastructure engineer at Health Informatics Centre at the University of Dundee. I'm a co-chair of the Community Working Group. I helped set up the UK TRE originally, and I'm also heavily involved in Sartre.
Morning all, I'm Balint, Programme Manager at Dare UK, and also co-chair of the Community Management for the UK TRE community. Good to be here.
Cool. So we also have Madeline, who's a co-chair, who will be joining a bit later. But for all of us, you can find us at any point and ask us any questions and any issues you're having. And questions. If you have questions, please just feel free to put them in the chat and we can answer them there, or to raise your virtual hand. So in your Zoom settings, if you go to more and reactions, you'll be able to see, or just reactions, you'll be able to see an option to raise your hand like that. It'll raise, over here, put a yellow hand at the top, and then you can ask a question and lower it when you're done. And recording. So we're recording this part and the community updates, and we'll put that on our YouTube afterwards. But breakout rooms won't be recorded. So please, 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 and we always say this, please take as many notes as possible from your breakout rooms. Maybe organize for someone to be a note taker or take collaborative notes so that we can write up a really accurate report afterwards for those who could not make it today. Cool. To get some brain juices started at 9:30 this Thursday morning. We've got a couple of sort of icebreaker intro questions on Slido. So if you either scan that QR code or go to this link, which we can just put in the chat, then there'll be some questions there in a second. If I go to present mode, if you go to that link and then go to polls, you should be able to see the questions. I'm also going to scan the QR code so I can participate because I want to answer some of these questions right. Cool. So if you open that link and go to polls, or go to Slido and type in this hashtag 5412500. If maybe David, you can share that in the chat as well. That'd be great.
Polls isn't showing anything for me at the moment, Harry. So,
it should be now.
Yeah, got it.
Thank you for checking.
As if by magic.
Yeah. So yeah, it'd be great to know, to begin with, how many UK TRE community meetings have you been to? And this counts as one. So if this is your first one, please put one. And otherwise, please share how many you've been to. Just good to know what kind of spread we have. Cool. I like how it's mostly 4+ and 1. So either it's the veterans or new people. So you give it like 10, 15 more seconds.
Is this a trick question? We all say 4+, and actually the answer, there haven't been more than 4.
Can you imagine?
We're just not paying attention.
It's all your first one. You imagined all the previous ones. Never happened. Awesome. That's good to know. Well, welcome if it is your first one. And just after this, we'll do a quick intro to the community if you're not quite sure exactly what we're doing, and before we dive into the keynote as well. So question 2, what would you like to see from the UK TRE community? So this could be things you want to get from the meeting, things you want to see from the community in general, things you want to learn, like anything that comes to mind of like, oh, I'm here because I would like to see this, or I want to learn about this, or I want to talk to these people, or anything like that. It'd be interesting to know. Co-design solutions to common issues. Nice. Share challenges and issues. Awesome. Learn about TREs and how they work. Nice. That feels like definitely the foundational one. Learn, support, best practices, standards, architecture. Awesome. Practical discussion, collaborative problem solving. Sweet. Oh, I cannot keep up. Safe space. That's a really important one. Learning about TRE best practices, sharing good practice. Oh, this is cool functionality. Look at that. It's like this capturing themes. This is on the free version as well. If you guys need an interactive poll for your meetings, Mentimeter is only 50 people now. Go with Slido. Awesome. Fun, importantly. Yes. Cool. So it looks like we're all here for learn more about TREs, learn about what's going on in the space, and understand more about shared challenges and issues and sort of collaborative solutions and consensus, which is absolutely amazing. And yes, public engagement, obviously a huge one as well. So feel free to keep adding a couple of thoughts in there. But final question, and mainly because we're just curious as to what people think of this, which of these is the right answer to this question? Am I older than David? Is David older than me? Or are we the same age? No wrong answers, obviously.
But clearly there are, you know?
Nah, no wrong answers. Interesting spread. We're thinking there's like a double bluff here, where people are like, well, the answer looks like it's obvious. So that's probably not the right answer. I'm not sure how you feel about those responses.
I'm good. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, for record, David is a bit older than me, but I think the beard gives it away. I don't quite have that like authoritative, mature beard. But nice to know we come across the same age. That means David looks young and I seem mature, which is great for everyone. Cool. Thank you for answering those questions. And again, what I'll do is actually, I'll just go back to this question. If there's anything else you want to throw into the Slido that we can look at afterwards, please do feel free to throw it in. But yeah, we'll get started with everything else. So brief intro to the UK TRE community before we dive into Chris's talk. We have a vision of having a 4 nations coordinated collaborative approach to research infrastructure for working with sensitive data. We are focused on the UK at the moment, though we do also welcome international collaborators and interested international parties as well to come into that collective vision. And our mission is to provide the space to signpost, share knowledge, and facilitate conversations across the UK TRE landscape. And the really important thing here is we're trying to perform a sort of signposting and facilitation role rather than the driving role ourselves. So we totally want to be driven by what the community and what you guys here want to talk about today, and don't want to set the agenda ourselves. So connecting up work, facilitating conversations, and making sure this collaborative approach can actually happen. And the kind of things we want to be using this space for, and you may have seen this slide before, is thinking about things like sharing knowledge, sharing best practice about what we find is working and not working, what is good, what is bad in the TRE space, to again foster collaboration, to see what opportunities there are to work together, people doing similar things in the space, to avoid duplication where possible. So if one group is working on X, that group is one working on X, and it's not being duplicated unnecessarily by group Y as well. And also move towards this place of sort of standard approaches and consensus in the TRE space. And as I mentioned, yeah, driven by community needs. So whichever ones of these we want to focus on, whatever topics we want to focus on, we want to connect with you guys and have you lead on them. And that's kind of what the breakouts are for. And so just thinking about that, looking back at the agenda again, having that kind of frame of mind as we go throughout the day. So for the keynote, Chris is going to give us an update from the NHS SNSD network and some thoughts. There'll be a long question and answer session. So do think about how this impacts your work and how it impacts the community and sort of the UK TRE space in general. When we're looking at the community updates, they are quite whistle stop, but do take a note of if you hear something interesting and you're like, that's really cool. And that's exactly what we're kind of struggling with or working on at the moment. Yeah, David.
Can you put the presentation mode? Have been asked by John.
Oh,
the content is a bit difficult to see.
Sure. Is that showing? Okay, cool. As always, sometimes it goes like a different screen on the Mac, and then I can never get back into it when I come out of it. Sorry, everyone. So on the agenda, got the keynote, community updates. Do think about who you can reach out to from those updates if they're doing interesting work. And the breakouts, really thinking about, we've got 60 odd, 65 people from the TRE space here and interested in it. What are the collaborative solutions to these workshops that we're having? If it's a workshop, if it's a demo, is there something that is of interest to you and your organization and potentially to others in the space as well? Is there something we should be looking to adopt as a community? If it's a breakout discussion, what are the possible next steps and actions that we can take as a community to move these things forward? So please do think about that as we go throughout today. I think that is it for the intro. Does anybody have any pressing questions or anything? Is there anything in the chat? Cool. In which case, Chris, if you're here, which I think I saw you were here earlier, over to you.
Hi, Harry. I'm indeed here. Thank you very much. And good to see everyone at this group. So for those that don't know me, my name is Chris Russell. So I'm a clinician by background, trained as an anaesthetist and worked in the NHS for 10 years before finding my way into the world of health data and health data research, which I've been for some time, working my way around some of the consultancies such as KPMG and IQVIA, but more recently found myself at HDR UK hubs such as Discover Now, which I helped set up. And for the past 2.5 years, I've been at NHS England as the head of delivery for the Data for R&D programme. And now I'm the head of the NHS Research SDE network. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to give a quick overview of the Data for R&D programme. I'm aware some of you will have seen some of these slides already, but for those that haven't seen them, we can catch up on what we're trying to do. We'll take a bit of a deep dive into some of the progress we've made recently and some of the more detailed delivery timescales. We're going to have opportunities for this team and this group to work collaboratively with the programme and how to best do that. And then finally, the Q&A. So let me find my slides and we will get going. Now, you'll have to forgive me. You will know with the NHS, we are very Microsoft Teams orientated. So it might just take me 1 second to find the share button. in what we're using, Zoom.
Yeah, it should be at the bottom with like a green.
Thank you. Got it. Lovely. I'm going to scroll back to the beginning of this.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second, guys. Apologies for this.
It helps. I'm terrible when I go to Teams.
I know. It's funny, isn't it, how it's all about user experience, right? Put a few buttons in a different place.
And it couldn't be an online meeting without some of this.
Of course not. Of course not. Great. So this is our Data for R&D program. And as you can see, I've stolen this presentation from Rebecca Cosgrove, who's our Deputy Director of the program at the moment. And I've just added some extra detail and updates. So can I just check, can people see that in full screen mode? That is working for everyone. Lovely. Thanks, Harry. Great. So Data for R&D program, the kind of mandate for our program started started way back in 2019. So the NHS long-term plan indicated that we need to do some more research with the NHS in order to help some of the health crises and problems we're having at the moment. Life sciences vision also indicated that the UK needs to do more around data-driven research and data-enabled trials in order to become more of a life sciences and economic powerhouse, but also to improve benefits for those in the NHS too. And Genome UK kind of echoed this from a more genomic perspective. All of this led to the Data for R&D program being formed. So there was a bid to the last spending review for £200 million to invest specifically in teams and tools and services that would enable health data research in the UK. Part of this plan was to create what we used to call SDEs back in the day, which is TREs, in order to enable safe access to data. The Goldacre review kind of affirmed this as the right approach in terms of public trust and making the most of data assets for people to use for research. And again, the Data Saves Lives strategy kind of further committed the NHS to backing this as a plan. So there's been a kind of a cumulative movement in this kind of direction of better using the data we have in the UK, the incredibly rich NHS data, where we have 4 different authorities in the UK, but using that better for research and driving better outcomes from that. And so essentially our mission for Data for R&D is based off the back of this. We want to improve care through better research, finding new treatments and faster treatments, support innovation, so help the researchers and tech companies who want to build new tools and apps that improve outcomes and develop new drugs and services in the NHS, and also to sustain the NHS. So we are we're very honest about this. We want our services to draw on income with us, and that income will be used to reinvest in research services and make those bigger and better for the future. So we're not shy about that at all. We want our service to be standing on its own 2 feet after the next spending review, so in the next 5 to 6 years. So basically the ask that we get from researchers quite a lot is we really want fast access to representative, multimodal and granular data. So people can do AI, run clinical trials, run real world studies, do big epidemiology and do health systems research. The challenge here again and again and again from academic researchers, but also industry, is that trying to get hold of data from the NHS is a nightmare. There are so many data controllers, so many processes, nothing's standardized, everything's different. And then when you get into the data, the quality is variable, et cetera, et cetera. So it's our mission to help try and address this challenge. We base ourselves around 6 use cases. So broadly speaking, we want to encourage more AI and algorithm development in NHS, which is kind of testing, training, and validation. The deployment is covered slightly elsewhere within our organization, but we won't go into that. Clinical trials activities such as feasibility studies, getting researchers and academics the quick yes or quick no that we can run this study is really important. Nobody wants to have to wait 9 months and fill in several thousand forms to find out that they cannot do this study in a certain database or area. We want to do real-world studies around safety and cost-effectiveness of medicines. We want to assist translational research around discovery and implementation of new medicines. And we kind of want to also enable those big epidemiological studies, such as the ones around COVID, looking at thrombosis rates of different vaccines that are going to pick up that kind of those things with a kind of a signal to noise ratio, which needs a really big data set, and also to better understand our population. And finally, health systems research. So looking at NHS organizations, especially as we move now from CCGs to ICBs, which clinical pathways are working, which ones aren't. Does an app or a particular intervention improve outcomes as much as it should do? So this is what we're driving at. I'm aware that you could break these use cases into a lot more detail, but just keeping them high level enables us to get our message across to kind of funders and ministers, and we can go into more detail at a later date if that's helpful. So just to kind of indicate where we've been. So this is what we've heard from a lot of engagement with academics industry. Basically, people come to the UK, they know we've got really useful data, but they don't know where to find it, and if the project's going to be feasible. They've had to reach out to lots and lots of different people using different forms, different sources, and being rejected for reasons which aren't always transparent. It takes an awful lot of time to get us anything done, and essentially at the best of it, you get an incomplete and inconclusive kind of view of the data. And what we're really aiming towards, and this is looking more towards the future state, so we're starting to get towards some of the deliverables from our program, is what do we want to set up? So we want to set up a really kind of a slick user service where step one is a user will be able to browse services and register at a single portal, a single gateway, and we're using the innovation gateway for that at the moment, where you can browse data by collection, you can do a search, you can browse by SDE, but as well as seeing the data, metadata, you can also see the service catalog. So from our secure data environments, what services do they actually offer? So for example, do they offer AI capabilities and an extra GPU compute? Do they have a team of healthcare economists you can bolt onto your study to outsource some of that work? And that will all be contained in that kind of one-stop data and service catalog available via the gateway. The next step is through the same kind of innovation gateway, we'll be able to request access to data. So we're currently working with our SDEs now to come up with a standardized data access form. So we'll be putting in the same amount of data, the same details for each of our SDEs, and it will look and feel the same to people coming to use the system. And then finally, conducting the project. From the gateway, you'll be handed off to a prime SDE. That SDE team will look after you, look after your research, and make sure that all of the researches can be done that you want to do through a single analytical interface. Now that might differ depending on the research question, but essentially once you're plugged into an SDE, it's going to look and feel the same to you, regardless of where that data is being federated or algorithms being federated from. And essentially, we're doing this, we're achieving this vision through a federated network of SDEs. So it's a single program delivering access to up to 55, 56 million records. And we're doing that regionally. So this isn't a centrally driven program in terms of we're not putting all the data in one place. I think the NHS has tried to do that several times in the past. It's never quite worked and tends to fall on its face. And we don't want to remake some of those mistakes. Similarly, by taking a regional approach, we're getting access to academic and clinical experts on the ground who understand that data better, can apply local expertise to analysis and become fully fledged members of that research project team. Also, by taking that regional kind of aggregate approach, we can look at much more kind of richer multimodal data across imaging, pathology, genomics, and structured data. Again, just to iterate to this group, one of the challenges we sometimes get from, for example, some of the life sciences bodies is can't just put all of the data in one place. But as you can imagine, that's an incredibly complex task. If you think about all of the data in every hospital system, EHR, GP practice, social care service, et cetera, that putting that in one single SDE would be, from a governance point of view, be incredibly difficult, but even from a technical and timeline point of view, essentially not to be feasible. So the regional approach for us works because it's feasible. It allows access to better, richer multimodal data, and we still capture those local clinical and research expertise that many of you will know from working from academic institutions on this call, that you have locally and can tap into. So broadly speaking, our program on a page is split into two big deliverables. We've got data-enabled trials on one side. That is the currently the NHS Digitrials service. So Digitrials sits within NHS England, what was NHS Digital. And it is a function by which you can find a cohort of people within the data they hold, use section 251 to legally re-identify those people and invite them to take part in a clinical trial. So it's been really successful to date. For example, the Grail Galeri study, we recruited 140,000 patients to a trial within 10 months. We think that's actually globally the fastest recruiting mass recruitment to a trial ever. And the team are now helping Our Future Health get as many signups as possible through Digitrials. So if you've had an OFH invite through the post, that would have been generated and created by the Digitrials team. On the other side, we've got our secure data environment network. So in the big box there, you can see the England secure data environment. So that contains all of the kind of legacy NHS digital data that you'll be familiar with. So SUS, HES, maternity services data set, MHDS, IAPT, all that kind of nationally collected coded data is available for research via the NHS England SDE. So incredibly broad, 56 million records, perhaps not as deep as some of the rich data sources, and it doesn't include anything multimodal, such as imaging, X-rays, or genomics. Over on the right box there, we've got our sub-national secure data environments. So there are 11 of these in total, although they're not all building a technical platform. Some of them are putting their data in other people's platforms to kind of reduce the duplication there. But those regional teams cover all of England. They are plugged into their local data controllers, their local researchers, and their local clinicians, so they can really get that data kind of curated and accessible legally and with PPI input across the patch. The kind of big enablers to our program, the things that actually have to run throughout or we can't do it, are PPIE. So we absolutely have to have the public and patients on board with what we're doing, how we're using data, and actively engaged in discussions around privacy, trade-offs, and commercial conversations. Service design is embedded throughout, so we want this to be a slick service. It needs to look and feel like any other kind of professional commercial service where it's easy to click through, register, access services, pay for services, and leave the product that you want. And finally, another big enabler is a data access policy. So you might have seen some drafts of this data access policy by the Department of Health team. And this is addressing the overall move from data release to secure data environments. As you know, the kind of when we've been engaging with the public, there is a reticence to allow their data to flow out of NHS systems and into other people's systems. And we find that they are much more trustworthy and open to how the data can be used if that is kept within an NHS environment, but with researchers coming into the data rather than the data going out. So the journey so far, we have our network set up of SDEs. These are now had almost a full year of funding, and they've gone from some people being an absolute kind of brand new team and service up to kind of developing an MVP. Some of those more mature SDEs have become have added functionality and are starting to converge with other SDEs as well. So let's give an example. So Great Western, for example, I'm sure the Great Western team won't mind me saying, but they were much less mature in terms of their research environment journey than some of the parts of the country. But through the kind of funding and grants we've been able to give out, they're kind of building that infrastructure on the ground. So they've got the team involved now who can start to curate and prepare that data and allow that to be surfaced through an SDE for research. If we look at other SDEs that were already advanced, so Thames Valley and Surrey, so this is based out of Oxford, already home of NCME and doing some active research out of its EHR, but again has now built out a team that covers that entire patch and has section 251 and REC sign off to use data for research from any of the ICBs that are contributing to it. So we've got the health data gateway being developed as the single front door. We've got research studies in progress. We've got our data pipeline online, so researchers can see what data sets are going to be available and when by each SDE. And we've also got a powered by NHS data campaign. So this is a series of videos which are kind of a soft sell of the benefits of data. The statistics show that 1 in 10 of the population have actually seen these videos as they've been released. And I'm afraid I don't have a link here, but I'll try and circulate those for those who haven't seen it after this presentation, so you can also take a look. So the journey so far as well. So if we look to before the program started, you could, arguably there were over 7,000 points of entry into the NHS data ecosystem. If you look at data controllers with over 200 trusts, we're trying to consolidate and converge this now into 11 subnational teams with one national SDE. Of those 12 teams, they've now consolidated or converged into 8 tech builds, and we expect to see some further convergence over time. And in fact, some consortia are already naturally starting to evolve. So if we look at the south of England, Thames Valley and Surrey, Kent, Medway and Sussex, Wessex and Great Western have already naturally come together as a collaboration to kind of really leverage the strengths of each of those teams and form a bigger kind of partnership. And towards the future, we're looking to concrete that single user journey for any researcher wanting to use NHS data, which starts with the Innovation Gateway, so they can browse NHS data in conjunction with all of the great metadata that's in there, choose which data they want for research and run their program. We're trying to build on what's already worked and dock in with the ecosystem where possible. So, for example, we are just starting to have some more useful conversations. I say useful, what I mean is we just haven't had the capacity to do it properly in the past with Northern Ireland, with SAIL, Research Data Scotland, about how we might want to align in the future. So we do need to, and that might be of interest to some people on this call, about how we do dock into the wider UK landscape. We work alongside Genomics England, doing some driver projects with them, and we're also close to CRPD and Biobank and Our Future Health. So we are trying to kind of help manage this ecosystem to make it as clear and easy, but also as functional as possible for researchers. And just to give some case studies of the work that's already being done. So this is a heart failure AI-powered stethoscope tool that's being used in primary care. So this is coming, I believe this is out of Northwest London. Yes, it is. So this is from Imperial. We're using real-world data from EHRs, from their longitudinal health data record that they already have, their Health in Discover Now, plus some bring your own data from device-generated data. We've been able to show that then this AI-powered stethoscope created by Echo can actually help diagnose heart failure much more quickly and efficiently in primary care. And in doing so, they are preventing emergency admissions, which are more expensive and have worse outcomes. So they've done that background work on the real world data to show that if you present in GP with heart failure, you tend to do better and cost less to the system than if you present to A&E with heart failure for your first diagnosis. Looking at how we kind of work towards our AI use cases, we've got our West Midlands STEs doing some work around AI validation in TRE environments and providing sandboxes and sandpits for that. Oops, sorry, gone too quickly. West Mid's platform is also developing to do some clinical trials and epidemiology using AI to help find cohorts. So this kind of AI model validation and development is kind of core to what we're doing, and what we really want to do is give really safe environments for people who are interested in AI to develop algorithms and tools and test them out, giving access to as much data as possible. Within NHS England SDE, so the NHS England SDE is interesting. It actually hosts the British Heart Foundation Health Data Science Centre, which is the HWK BHF funded data science centre. So that is a tenancy within NHS England's SDE, and that team have been helping to define the requirements and help test and feedback on the capability. DataCan, the HWK hub for cancer, also has a tenancy within the national SDE. And aside from that, we've got some other industry users in, such as AstraZeneca and Evidera. I think it's worth focusing a little bit on Evidera because this is a really unique study. They wanted to look at some kind of complications and effectiveness of COVID vaccinations and some campaigns around that. Because this was a COVID study, they could use COPI and access 56 million records, which are linked to primary care, secondary care, vaccination data. Now, previously, with a data release model, this study would not have been possible. It wouldn't have passed IGARD, and the data would never have been able to release at such scale. But because there are people coming into the SD to access this data, it just shows how that innovative research, which wasn't previously possible, is now being enabled at scale. A bit more about some of the multimodal work we're doing. So we're working with Genomics England to look at digitized imaging data alongside clinicogenomic data to understand predictive models in cancer. We've got some genomics driver projects around federation. We've noted obviously research is hindered when data sets are siloed and not interoperable. And we really need those genomics data sets where they've already been collected and consented when legally able to federate between those. And the learnings from this project will be obviously applied across our program. In fact, it's probably worth saying now, because I don't have a slide on it, we're currently looking at what we're calling federated driver projects across our network. So Phil Waywell, who you may know from Yorkshire and Humber AHSN, is leading on that from our national team to collect potential research projects, which will be high impact and really demonstrate the value of having a federated network of SDEs as the basis for data-driven research. And we can talk more about what they are going to be at a later meeting if we're invited back. I don't want to be presumptuous. How do you engage with us? Well, there's a couple of ways. This is a great forum to engage, actually, because it'd be good to know what your thoughts are, get your feedback. Obviously, we have members of our team involved in SATRA and those meetings, and we are actively learning from that group as well as contributing to it. But we do have a health data user group. So the membership is across industry, academia, and medical research charities. It's a forum for discussion. We have quarterly newsletters and regular engagements. There's an annual conference, which is always a good one to go to see people in real life as well as hear about what's going on. And you can email data.healthresearch@nhs.net to be on the mailing list and to get the invites to this. And you can also access our NHS Futures platform, which will give you a bit more detail about the content of the user groups, but also enable you to access things such as our data pipeline if you want to take a closer look at what the SDs are making available and when. Okay, that's all very high level. Let's give you a bit more detail on what we've actually been doing. So progress so far, as well as moving a lot of money out to our SDs and then building a team and recruiting and et cetera, as a program, we've made some decisions on how we're going to work. So I've talked about that single front door through the health data gateway for data finding, cohort discovery, and data access applications. So that cohort discovery is a bit of functionality we're going to fit in the middle, which is where using an OMOP data model, a user will be able to ping off a query to our SDEs that are up and running and get basic counts back on the data that they hold, just to give people a slightly better idea of whether they can host their research in that SDE or not, or if it's going to be a federated project across multiple SDEs. We've agreed that our data standards obviously need to do some convergence, and there's two ways of doing that. We are working with HDR UK to map who's done what already with OMOP and prioritize what of our data sets should be transformed to OMOP in the first instance to help interoperability, compare apples with apples, and also compete globally and work globally with researchers where possible. I've got another slide or two of that coming up, which has got a bit more detail in. As well as those data standards, we're working with our NHS England team, which is the data analytics team, which is led by Ming Tang, about how we also feed into the data standards that NHS England will be working on over the short term and long term as they move towards an FTP platform and think about national data collections. So all in all, we want to be very involved in standards to make sure when we are as NHS England collecting data, there is a common standard applied. Also, when we are working with our SDEs around the regions, there are standards applied to make sure that people can use data across multiple ones. We are aligning our research governance. So most of our SDEs are now pursuing a Section 251 approval and REC approval, which will give them delegated authority to approve research projects. So what this means is that rather than having to go through CAG and REC, or CAG, I should say, for each research study, the SDE itself will be able to sign off the governance for that research study itself, which is going to be a slicker, easier user journey. We're going to follow the SATRA standard architecture for TREs way of talking about SDEs. Now, I have to caveat this very slightly. As you'll probably know, as a program, we're fairly wedded to our term of secure data environment rather than TRE. Now, that's no hard feelings there. It's that when we've tested it with the public have challenged us, saying, well, this thing's new, we don't trust it. We don't want it to be trusted, we want it to be secure. So we've heard that, and that's how we're referring to them. However, very aware that globally and within the HDR UK community, the TRE is an accepted phrase. So that's what we've been up to. And I guess one of our challenges now is so this is by no means complete, and I'm sure any one of you on this call could add about 20 boxes that aren't here already. But I just wanted to give you an update on some of the challenges that we're looking at as a program when we're talking about moving away from data release to data access, and how we're thinking about converging our infrastructure in the future to try and help researchers have a more acceptable journey. So this is us. We've got 11 subnational SDEs sat within our research network. We fund the NHS England SDE, which is within NHS England. It's also a bit funded by HCL UK when we talk about BHF and the Digitrial service. But then within NHS England, we have other unique data assets as well. So the NDRS team, which is the rare diseases, cancer and congenital abnormalities, sits in there as well. And they are on the way to moving into the SDE. And we also more recently have Open Safely join the fold, of which I think it's fair to say we're still kind of like we're having conversations with that team about how it will all work. It's a very recent announcement. So there's the 3 tenants that are already in the NHS England SDE. So they are funded 2 by HCL UK and 1 by Department of Health. Department of Health and Social Care have a tenancy within our SDE, which they use for analysis, which is all departmental. And then we have NIHR funding BRCs and some ARCs. Now, some of the BRCs have made noises about wouldn't it be great to join an SDE? And actually what's happened is some SDEs have migrated their infrastructure into a BRC where that has already been the more advanced setup. We have an awful lot of other SDEs being set up too, or I should say that are already in existence and working. So CPRD, Office for National Statistics, Refuge Health, and UK HSA, which looks at all the health protection data. Then we have a whole bunch of NHS trusts who've got their own SDE. So we've got things like the Leeds Flatiron Partnership, UCLH, Great Ormond Street, RMH. Some of these have indicated they might like to be more involved in the network. Others we've not been able to have that conversation with. So what I'm trying to kind of build up for you is like we're working in a complex environment, and what we're trying to do is set up a community of practice and standards which enable as many people to interact with the network as possible. We won't be able to fund everyone. Obviously, the money is finite, but we're setting up the right frameworks, what we're trying to do. We want to make it easy for anyone who wants to be involved to be part of the network. And so in addition to those SDEs, we've also got our commercial SDEs too. And this is just a quick piece of work. I had a look at the DARS releases from February and looked at what data is being released from NHS England to commercial organizations. And each of these companies has also essentially got its own proto SDE. So we think about IQVIA, Health IQ, kind of well-known analytics services where you can go to for as kind of analytics as a service. Similarly with people like Boston Consulting and McKinsey, these are management consultancies where you can go and they will analyze data on your behalf, give you insights. But in the future state of and with data access, we will need to think about how all of these external commercial SDEs start to interact with the SDE network that we're setting up. So just some of the challenges we've got ahead. I talked about OMOP earlier, and I thought some people on this call might want to know a bit more about what we've done. So we've done a mapping exercise with HCL UK. So I must thank that team for doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us. And we looked around our SDEs and who's done what. So if we look at the Northwest, which is the Liverpool, Manchester, Lancs and Cumbria area, they have done a transformation on their EHR warehouse with 15 years data of that kind of quite deep EHR data, like everything all the way down to vital signs and lab results. So really rich database there. They've also done a OMOP transformation for the lab results that are not in EHR. So things like microbiology and cultures rather than using these in FBC, for example. And they've also done the Somerset Cancer Registry, well, that's in progress. Wessex, the HIC for myeloma. So they've done an OMOP transformation there. Yorkshire and Humber are working on their primary and secondary care database. I believe that's based out of the shared care record, but I'm happy to be corrected on that, on how to kind of OMOP that kind of data. TVS are working on the commissioning data sets, which are obviously those big nationally collected ones, cancer outcomes, radiotherapy, and anti-cancer therapy. London are working on primary care data, OMOPs, and West Mids are doing the COVID-19 data set and maternity, which is in progress. So what we're trying to do here is just make sure we're not duplicating. So where someone's got a good process for doing an OMOP transformation, let's share that with the network and share the documents with the network too, so we're not having to reinvent the wheel too many times. And what's coming up, East of England are doing a specific heart failure data set that they're doing an OMOP mapping on. KMS are still kind of doing a bit of a look around what they're going to transform first. London are planning on doing their SUS. Wessex is going to do a bit more on demographics, and East Mids are again understanding what their needs are. So a bit of a deep dive into some of the detail as well as some of the general things. I'm probably going to stop there. That's probably enough of me talking, and everyone will get bored. And Harry, over to you if you'd like to share any Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. That was very comprehensive, and we've got a bunch of questions coming in, and I'm sure there'll be more in the room for this. So there are some questions people put in the Q&A on the HackMD. We can also just raise hands in the Zoom room, and we'll kind of alternate between the two. Feel free, if you have put a question in the Q&A, feel free to also raise your hand. If you ask it here, we'll just remove it from the Q&A list that we have already. So please do also raise your hand. If you don't, if you'd rather not speak, please feel free to put your question in the chat as well. I guess to start with, as like a warm-up one, before we get others coming in from the room, is you've got a lot going on with a lot of different like stakeholders, commercial, academic, industry, government across the UK. What can the UK TRE community do to help? Or what do you need from us?
That's a really good question. Yeah, there is a lot going on. I think there's a couple of things. There's some kind of like formal and kind of informal ways you can help. And I can see Andy from our team is on this call, and I think Prebz is joining later. I think it's really important that the kind of what you're doing as a community, as kind of almost like pioneers and people that are leading on parts of this, is kind of communicated back as possible to our team. So we can kind of hear what you're saying, share any learning. And I say, we've already agreed to kind of use the kind of SAPTRA definitions of things. It's really, it's also a really useful way to connect into some of the other work that's going on around. I can see people here from the TRE UK community to make sure we're aware of what's going on there. And again, it's all about share and learning, make sure we're kind of picking up what's already happening in the community. We definitely don't want to reinvent any wheels or create any new systems where possible. So yes, being part of that is helpful. I think the second thing you can do is more unofficial, is kind of where possible, if you could, if it's helpful, kind of raise awareness of the program. So where you think someone's doing a piece of work which might fit nicely into what the STE network is trying to achieve, if you could highlight that to us, that would be really helpful too. We want everyone to feel, we want everyone to be kind of included and hear their views too. Occasionally we'll come across an academic group or institution that is not familiar with our program and is slightly blindsided by it, which is a position we don't want to be in. And ideally we want people to know what we're trying to do, what the plans are, and how they can best be involved.
Makes a lot of sense. And as you suggested and put in the chat, you're always welcome and invited to our community thinking spaces as well, to make sure that we could keep that bridge. Cool. Like I said before, Miranda, please do raise your hand or put it in the Q&A on the HackMD. At this stage, probably raise your hand if you do have a question. There is another one here on thinking about the research, or mostly research, just the requirements you've got between, say, academic institutions, maybe from a research or STE perspective, compared to a commercial one, compared to a public body, and just some thoughts from you on like how you're balancing what potentially are competing environments and what you're provisioning within the STE network.
So I think that's a really good question. And what we want our network to be able to do is serve the whole range of use cases from, if we start at the ones that have got a PhD student who is essentially, you could argue is time rich but cash poor, to be able to very, efficiently access the data they need to do the work, all the way through to, we have some kind of health venture capital companies that are interested, who have a small number of investors who want to invest in pharmaceutical and tech interventions, but they don't actually have a team, so they want to outsource their entire research to an STE team. So we're kind of trying to fill that spectrum. So everything from kind of a data access as safe but best value as possible, all the way through to a fully outsourced service. I think the good news for researchers is if we look at that to the more left side of that scale, actually that's the basis of everything. So even if we're building an outsourced service, internal analysts will still need R, Python, all those kind of libraries associated with them, and enough compute to be able to do the work they need to do. So that in itself should hopefully satisfy a lot of what basic research is. However, also aware that researchers like to push the boundaries somewhat. So we need to be listening about things like what's happening in the world of high compute research. Where might you need GPUs? Where might you need specific plugins and tools that aren't there as a standard? So there'll also be an element of an ongoing conversation. So as people come to SDEs and start talking about the kind of projects they want to do, we will very much be in listening mode to try and collect those requirements and make sure they're fed into any future development cycles.
Cool, that makes a lot of sense. I guess that's where that like service gateway comes in as well, where researchers be able to see what tools you're offering, and if they can't find the ones they need, they can raise that with you.
That's cool. Right. So essentially, you'll be able to select, or part of the process, we help to select an SDE which can best suit your research question, or has the tools already.
Makes a lot of sense. It kind of links the idea of like what tools and packages or provisions you have within the SDEs. You mentioned that there's some like consortia forming within the network already. There's a question around those larger partnerships, whether that's that consortia is forming from like a tech stack perspective, or whether it's just like best practice or like frameworks or something else, or is it more just general partnerships?
So yeah, I'll give an example. The main one is currently the Southern Collaborative, which is made of Wessex, Thames Valley and Surrey KMS, and Great Western. So of those 4 SDEs, they're essentially having 2 builds. One of them is built out of a kind of a BC platforms kind of basis, run out of Wessex, which is really useful for kind of like epidemiology and kind of cohort finding style research. The Thames Valley SDE is based more out of a deep EHR integration and imaging platform. So if you did want to analyze your 9,000 clinically curated chest X-rays, it would be the TVS platform that would use. But that will kind of, so in a way, by coming together, we're getting the best of both worlds there. We're getting, although there are 2 builds, they're addressing very different research questions. The data will be able to flow between any of those 4 to whichever SDE needs to do the work. So that's one thing, but I think more broadly, we're forming kind of frameworks by which essentially anyone will be able to form a collaborative in the future. So we'll be able to kind of curate their data, add it to an SDE, even join onto the kind of the commercial agreements and data access agreements that are already up and running. So the idea will be more of a plug and play system, so consortia can come and go as they please.
Perfect, thank you. You kind of alluded to this a bit already on organizations that want to work with the data probably have to come into an SDE to do so. There's a question on how the SDE network will work with other TREs or SDEs in the network, the outside of the network itself. For instance, if there are studies which want to use, say, some NHS data and other data as well, that's within and then also outside the network.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think it's fair to say that's not a use case we've worked through yet. So we're trying to set things up so they're always kind of interoperable as possible, and where governance will enable that to happen. We're also trying to, some of our SDs are leading on a bring your own data capability. So where a researcher may have their own bespoke data set that they want to bring in, we'll have the right governance pathway set up so that can safely come into an SDE where needed to be linked to existing data and then serviced again through the SDE in a linked way. So that is on our pipeline, but I think it's fair to say we've not kind of worked through how that would work at a granular way just yet.
There's a question that came in the Zoom of finding out more about the tech stacks you're using in detail.
Yep. That's from Tony. Yeah, so we could probably do that on a future date because they are. But the approach we've taken is we've actually been tech agnostic. We didn't want to impose what the tech and tools should be on our teams. We feel that the researchers and the SDs and the teams that know best what they need to answer their research questions. What we have asked though, and this is actually linked to the MOU and the funding, it needs to be interoperable. So that means adhering to common data models, ensuring data can technically flow from SDE to SDA or algorithm can, depending on the question. And that the right IG legal basis is set up for that to happen. So each of the SDs have to adhere to certain standards to make sure that happens. But I think it's fair to say most are on a kind of an Azure platform, a couple on AWS, and then there's a right mix of people using different tools on top of it. So there's Snowflake, there's BC platforms. A lot of people are using Microsoft's own TRE tools that they have available for Azure. And then on top of that, again, you've got research tools. So most people have got R, Python, Starter on top of all of this stack as well. So there's a bit of variability on almost like that kind of like application, sorry, the kind of middle layer there with a kind of almost like a common clouds and a common set of tools on top.
Cool, awesome. And I guess that's where things like Starter come in to provide the baseline understanding that then tools can build on top of.
Yes, yeah, maybe that's, and if that's helpful in the future, we could pick that up in one of our groups, which is sharing that baseline of what everyone's doing at the moment. But
awesome, thank you. So just, oh, Fergus has got his hand up.
Yeah, morning, Chris. Thanks for the keynote. I'm sort of a little bit of a crystal ball-y question, but I'm very curious. The balancing act that you're going to have to play with, sort of having at some point to stand on its own 2 feet, right? The overall sort of data for R&D service. Is there, like, at the moment, is that more just kind of an ambition and a principle, and that's what we're aiming for? Or is there actually, is there something, a hard deadline or soft deadline somewhere that says by this stage we need to be, somewhat sustainable, or whatever the wording is you want to use, right? How sort of clear is that, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, good question. I think the truth is we have a plan to create a plan. And what that means is at the moment we're kind of we are still using money from the last spending review to fund our platforms. There is an expectation and ambition that we are already applying for further funding in the next spending review, which will give us another 3 to 4 years of allowing these services to kind of continue to prime them so they can set up, recruit, start doing work, start doing business. So that's one way of doing it. I think another thing we're doing is also having a set of conversations with NIHR about how we can simplify research funding for data-driven research. So this is totally off the top of my head, so this is not formal policy at all. But for example, could we buy a block chunk of an SDE for capacity for people who are applying for research grants, just to kind of make it easier for people applying for grants to access the data in terms of filling in forms and also financial flows and invoicing. So that's 2 things. So firstly, more SR funding, ideally get enough industrial kind of income in the future to kind of fund some of these. And then secondly, think about where research funding already comes from and how we can streamline that to make it as easy as possible to kind of for researchers to use SDEs. But yeah, I think we've still got another 4 or 5 years before they're self-sustaining.
Cool, thanks.
Well, Richard, you got your hand up as well.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, it was just because it was quite closely related to that previous point. Is there a concern that in the future, if these environments need to be self-sustaining, that you end up with natural competition occurring? So an SDE is going to be more profitable the more studies they have. So you'd find potentially that the better SDEs will suck in all the projects and all the money and thrive, but the lesser SDEs that aren't as good in whatever way then fall by the wayside, and you end up with a fragmented picture.
Yes, that's a real risk. Agree. We have to be very wary of that. And again, we're currently in the plan to have a plan stage, so things that I say could change. But one of the ways we could do that is kind of having a retained central function, which can just help manage the market in a sense, to make sure that people are. I guess the thing that we want people to kind of collaborate on data, but compete for services, and where people can then specialize in particular data types, but actually the data is flowing from everywhere. But agree, it's a real risk that you could have 1 or 2 dominant players distorting the market, and we're putting in kind of market management planning and mitigations to kind of stop that from happening. But yeah, that's very much in the planning stage now.
Okay, great, thanks.
I think we'll have one more question, which is in the chat that Andy shared. And then Chris, if you'd be happy to, we might circulate the remaining questions with you afterwards. And if you could just provide a text response or something to them, and then we can publish that when we publish the report as well. A question from Andy on the idea of integration and federation being facilitated due to most deployments being cloud-based, like Azure and AWS, and hence using common infrastructure or common approaches. Is there an approach to integration and federation between cloud and on-premise TRE deployments, or is it just purely cloud-based? And if there are integration federation approaches and standards, is that documented anywhere?
So I think what we're seeing amongst our network is most people are using cloud-based services, and even when people have got on-prem, they're looking to move to cloud. I think where that differs slightly is when people have got a really strong AI team or a center of excellence for AI on site, where they are still looking at using some of their on-prem stuff for the foreseeable future. And yes, on part of our tech and data working group is to kind of work out that that kind of framework by which anyone will be able to kind of come and plug into the network, essentially become part of it and interoperate provide their data via the gateway and be involved in the research that we're doing. And by doing that, I think it's fair to say we're hoping to increase the kind of visibility of people's data. So some people have probably got a really useful data set somewhere, which at the moment not many people know about. And by plugging into the network and surfacing it via the gateway, it's an instant way to kind of put in a front door and commercial terms and governance around that. So that data can be surfaced and used helpfully for research.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That was incredibly insightful. Also, great set of questions and responses as well. Really appreciate your time. As I mentioned, there's a couple of additional questions haven't been answered, but we'll surface with you afterwards as well. Also, I'm not sure what your schedule looks like, but from the breakout sessions, we'll have some like general discussion rooms, and if there are any additional things people want to talk about and Chris will be able to hang around, we're happy to go into breakout discussions there.
Thanks, Harry. So I will have to dash, but just say Andy will be here for my team, and I think perhaps from Genomics England, who's also part of the program, will also be around for those.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks, everyone. Great questions.
Yeah. Cool. All right, we are now going to move into 10-15 minutes of community updates. These are just like quick fire 2 or 3 minute things people in the community to share updates to the community. We have some submitted beforehand. We'll go through first, and then if we have time, if there's any others that come to mind that you'd like to share with everyone, you've got 50, 60, I can't remember how many people, maybe 70 people from the community here. So anything you want to share, now's a great chance to do it. We'll start with the ones that are pre-registered, and we've got some from Katie.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie. I'm the Public Engagement Manager at Research Data Scotland. I've just got a few updates from Research Data Scotland. For anyone who doesn't know, we're a not-for-profit organisation who was created and funded by the Scottish Government to improve access to data for research in Scotland. So the first one is that we have a researcher access service that is launching next month. This is a streamlined pathway for data professionals. It provides a simpler way to access 9 specific data sets that have public sector data in them. There's a link in the agenda to more information, and I'll put one in the chat as well. So it's launching in April, so there'll be more information on how people can apply for it then, and also on how it works. If you're interested in this, my colleague Paul Jackson is running a session in the first set of breakout sessions next, so you can go along for that as well. From a public engagement point of view as well, we are also going to our public panel and involving members of the public in these changes and new ways of accessing data as we go along. We're going to try and be as transparent as possible about that and put those summaries on our website, so if other people are doing similar work, they can see what we got back from our public panels. The second update that I have, and Handley Kate's put something in the chat about the Scottish Safe Haven Network, so it ties in really nicely. There's a Scottish Safe Haven Network that's a network of Scottish TREs. It includes the National Safe Haven and 4 regional ones. There's a steering group that oversees the network, which is currently in the process of refreshing the charter to bring it up to date and in line with what other TREs are doing across the UK. There's contact details on the website if you're interested in that and how they're going about it. We also have a showcase coming up of a fund that was set up to support the development of the Safe Haven network. The showcase is next week. Next week? Yeah, it's on the 21st next week. Anyone can register to attend and hear a bit more about those projects and how they'll help support the network. Again, I'll put a link to the chat. The final one is just to shout about, we ran a public engagement fund last year. We funded 8 different projects around Scotland, which were aimed to speak to different groups, particularly groups who might not normally engage about data for research, to get their views on not only how it's used by researchers, but how it's collected and how projects are kind of chosen to use that data as well. There were some really interesting outcomes from it, and a lot of them developed videos, infographics, and other really clear ways of communicating how data is linked, how data is used, how it's collected from GP surgeries. really useful if anyone is looking at doing that kind of communication work as well. There's little videos about each project by the project leaders, and all of the outputs are on the website as well, really clearly, plus contact details if you're interested in chatting with any of them as well. I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. That sounds incredibly useful and exciting, and a great use of the community updates as well. We've got one from Rob on the next version of the DARE federated architecture that I may have just pretty much said the update there.
Thanks, Harry. Well, that's kind of it, really. The title says it'll be out soon. It will be out soon. Now, I keep promising that, but we really will be out very, very soon. We have been distracted this year with putting together a proposal for the next phase of the DARE program. But the federated blueprint will be out before the end of the month, fingers crossed. Timely, given today's questions on federated TREs. So what we've tried to do in this version is bring together the driver project results from 2023, Teleport, Triffic, SARTRA in particular, and munge it all together, technical term, into a single architectural picture of how TREs be connected. It also covers the classic data pooling models like OpenSafely. I was partway through typing comments here, so it says crick there. Confirm your speaking language, Arabic. Zoom thinks I might have switched to Arabic.
I got that too, Rob, and I worried that I wasn't being very clear. So please, you did as well.
When you speak English, don't worry about it.
I mean, AI, what's not to like, eh? It's just going to make all our lives better. That's pretty much it.
Scottish is special.
It's my deep Scottish accent, Simon. So yeah, that's been a consolidated view of all the federated activities that's happened in the last few years. Hopefully it'll be out in time for Easter. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rob. So those are the ones we got submitted. We're going to go through a couple from the working groups we have in the community now. And then we'll just have like 1 or 2 minutes. If anything has come to mind, if any of you would like to share on the call, please do. So for the next ones, these are working groups in the community. What we're trying to get set up, and we'll have sessions on it later, is like clearly defined working groups within the community space where people can come and collaborate on shared outputs together. And a few of them have started. Thank you, Will. Pete Barnsley from Crick has started 3 of them, but he's unable to be here today. So I'm always, however many times you try it, you never know whether it's going to work. He's submitted an update via video, and I'm just going to play it now. Hopefully you'll be able to hear the sound. If you can't hear it or anything, please let me know in the chat.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Pete Barnsley, and I'm here to just give you an outline of 3 of the working groups. The definitions, SD, TRE definitions, the extending control, and the citizens agency. These working groups were all set up to address these concerns and objectives, really, that we wanted to minimize the time to research and delay, optimizing the return for value for money, for the research infrastructure, to make combining data sets easy, reducing the barriers of the research project scope, and to include citizen agency into the TRE landscape as we design and develop these things and look at information governance. And the picture on the right is meant to describe the sort of 3 zones that's been used in the discussions to date: the data zone on the left, the citizen zone in the middle, and the research zone on the right, with these arrows showing how different data sets can extend their control to the project, the research project, and so extend combining research data sets easy, making the time to research possible, but then allowing the citizen domain to have some engagement in those flows. So, quick summary, the definitions working group, we had some meetings in January attended by 25 people. There's some links there to what was created, so please go and have a look. It's generally agreed that SDs and TREs are different, but how and to what extent they differ had differing views. So to help with that, we created a survey that's out there, and we encourage people to go and click through and put their contribution in. We started with 3 different things: the sort of secure data environment, the trusted research environment platform, and the project trusted research environment concepts as a start. So please have a view, have a think, all views welcome. The second area was extending control. Again, in January, we had some meetings. 17 people attended and discussed this, and a result draft scope was created. Again, you can get it and see the proposed layout there and the notes. There's a couple of meetings, and it was generally recognized that this was a key area. How information governance can be extended by technology, and the views on how would be differing. So in order to do that, we proposed to collect a request for input, not like an RFI formally, but allowing people to contribute to how they do this or what their options are. So solutions, components to one, or ideas. And look to present to commercial vendors, existing providers of SDEs, TREs, etc., and any information governance fora that could provide, and along with everyone else. And you can see on the right-hand side here an example of the sorts of layout we were proposing to use, specifically the areas in the middle here of what sort of questions we would like responses to. The last one was citizen agency. And again, in January, 18 people met, and in a couple of sessions, and the results and scope of the work created an output report framework as a suggestion. And you can see that at that URL. Citizens were much more involved and could be even more involved than maybe in the past, and that would be a good thing. So how does it relate to information governance and data release processes is maybe a key area for us to consider. So as a result, we produced an idea of a report structure to identify the services that both citizens and researchers would want, and how that would look in terms of information governance and federation. The sort of layout of the agency report in terms of structure is shown on the right. So we'd love your engagement, have your say, become involved. So please get in contact. Thank you so much for listening. Hope this was a useful summary for our great community, and look forward to hearing from you soon.
Cool. Those are updates from Pete. A couple of things to say on that. So the SD-TRE working group is going to have a session. Madeline's going to be here in the second set of breakout sessions to lead on it. All the resources and links that Pete's talking about are open access on the agenda at the moment, and will also be on the website as well. The big thing is, with all of our working groups, they are open invite to any, as a requirement of them to be open invite to anybody who's interested. So when he says please engage and have your say, please do. Like if you're seeing things in there you're not sure about or want to feedback on, anything like that, please do get involved. Update from the Sartre working group.
Hello. Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Simon Lee. I'm helping to co-lead the Sartre working group. As some of you may know, we held our first working group meeting of 2024 last month, and I'm pleased to say we had really good attendance. It's great to see that people are still very engaged with Sartre. We're still writing up the notes, but and we've got a breakout session discussion in the first session, so I won't spend too much time. But to briefly summarize what we discussed, there were some big long-term questions about what's the long-term ownership, governance, and governance of Sartre. There's no way we're going to solve that in 2 hours. We started looking for sort of more co-leads for the Sartre working group, because obviously, we'll continue with our open collaboration principles that worked quite well last year. So if you couldn't make the first event, or indeed any event, that doesn't matter. There'll always be ways to contribute, and we'll actively solicit people's feedback. But what would be good is if we could get, say, more co-leads, especially from other institutions, to help manage the working group, especially, as you say, we start to get long-term governance, because that's the sort of thing where we really do need people who can invest the time in saying, how do we take Sartre forward? How do you put it on a sustainable footing? And honestly, very sort of thorny political questions about what is the long-term governance. We've also started to get sector-specific variants of Sartre. So in particular, the SDE network have done some very interesting technical work on saying how does Sartre align with their sort of capabilities. That's very cool to see. Longer term, we need to think about what other variants do we need? How do we prevent too much divergence? We've also started looking at how do we publish your evaluations. So one of the things we're planning to do is set a separate website from the formal specification, just where we can have, say, people put evaluations, whether they're full or partial. We publish all our working group notes there in the open. And I guess the final thing we need, ideally, a call to action from everyone here is Sartre V1 was published last year. We couldn't continue to work on it, but what we really need is feedback from people. And what we'd like you all to do is evaluate your TREs, send us your evaluation if you can. If you can't, for like privacy or commercial reasons, that's absolutely fine. But do please give us a feedback. And then just to repeat, we'll be holding a discussion session in the first breakout. But if you can't make it, don't worry, there'll be plenty more opportunities to talk to us.
Thank you, Simon. And yeah, just to reiterate, this wasn't on the agenda initially, but it is for today. There'll be a Sartre breakout on the Sartre working group in this first session at 11. Final one for me on the community management side, we're coming to the end of our grant funding that we got from DARE, which ends in March. And the sort of big aims that were to like further establish the foundations of the community. The two sort of big things we've been working on encompass a lot of the work we put together in our proposal is the website that will form as the sort of resource hub, working groups, like main central event space and signposting space for all the work happening in the UK TRE community and space. So we'll be looking through that today in some of the sessions, and also all the governance documentation for like how we define membership of the community, how we define what a working group is, what the expectations are, how we manage resources, how we do things like endorse outputs as like the official UK TRE community endorsement for things we accept as like nationally applicable and consensus on them, all that kind of stuff. We've been working on documentation for that, and we will be finalizing that as like the operating governance documentation for the community by the end of the month. So we've got 2 breakouts in each session for these conversations. I'll be in the first one, David will be in the second one to run through feedback on this resource hub on the website and input and discussion around the governance documentation. So please do join if you are interested. We're now going to have a 10-minute break before the sessions. Is there any like last-minute announcements anybody wants to make while we've got everyone here? Please feel free to like raise your hand or just chime in. Yeah, Simon.
So I just want to make 2 announcements. One, our TREs are pivoting quite hard to having TREs inside TREs, which is a bit of a weird concept. And the Sale Data Bank has 2 inside with 7 in negotiation right now, and DPK has 5 with 3 in negotiation, and MS Register has 3 with 1 in negotiation. So, you know, in a minute we're going to have more TREs in TREs than we have real TREs, and that's a bit weird. But again, anybody who's sort of doing this to self-harm to themselves, I'd like to talk to you, because I think this is a new concept, and we need to write documentation about what it means to be a TRE inside a TRE and all this good stuff. So again, anybody who wants to have a one-on-one chat about that, I'm more than welcome to that. And the second thing I'd like to say is that I'm about to write a white paper on secure container execution within TREs. We believe for Federation, we have to allow any container without any checks whatsoever to run inside your TRE securely. I think we've solved it from a technical perspective, so we're going to write that up. But I would like the community to kind of receive that document and challenge it, because if you disagree, I'd love a robust discussion about why I'm wrong. This is not a problem.
Awesome. Thank you, Simon. That's exactly the kind of thing that we think would be a great like community output that we can signpost to on the site and get people involved in discussing. Perfect. Thank you. And as a reminder with the updates, anything you find interesting, please feel free to reach out to people afterwards. We'll also share the report and details of how to get in touch. Cool. I will just quickly share my screen. We're now going to go into a break. The one thing I want to say is, firstly, this is the final non-actual break-related GIF you're going to see. I've exhausted them on Google, so the other ones are to do with actually taking a break. But we have the sessions coming up after the break, which are these ones. So five rooms of sessions. We'll have rooms 6 and 7 for general discussion. On the agenda is details for what's going to be covered in each session. So if you want to look in more detail what's going to be covered, check the agenda. But otherwise, we'll come back at 11:02 to go into the breakouts. I'll leave this slide up as well. See you in 10 minutes.